is fully prepared to assist the Commission to do substantial justice in the matters for which the Commission has invited the witness. But, my Lord, first of all, would like to point out that subsequent to the invitation dated the 15th of February 2019 to the witness, there was one sent yesterday requiring the witness to produce videos, discussions, among other relevant material that is in their custody as a result of the work they have done in respect of the matter being investigated. The time was limited, and so what has been supplied the Commission is not the full complement. So the witness will seek leave after his testimony today to be able to furnish the Commission with a full complement. Then we discovered also that the Rule 8, that notwithstanding, the witness understands that he's here as a non-target witness and is ready to proceed. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much. We have taken note of your opening remarks. Okay.
For the record, will counsel announce himself?
With respect to the Commission, I'm Samson Ladi Ayenini. I'm here with Mrs. Rosalind Kalaji, and we represent the witness.
Thank you very much. Mr. Evans, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, for the purposes of the record, please state your full name.
My name is Evans Mensah.
What do you do? So then, I should rather address you as Mr. Mensah.
Yes, sir.
And not Mr. Evans.
My lord, yes.
Very well. What do you do by way of profession?
I am a broadcast journalist.
For how long have you done that?
15 years.
It is right for me then to describe you as a very experienced broadcast journalist. Am I right?
You can say that, my lord.
Very well. What organization do you work for, Mr. Mensah?
The multimedia group, my lord.
Do you play any specific role within the organization?
Yes, my lord. I'm the editor, also the head of the political desk.
Very well. Is it a case that the multimedia group covered the Ayawaso West Wogon constituency by election?
Yes, we did, specifically Joy News, where the multimedia group is a pretty huge organization, but my direct responsibility is with Joy News.
Very well. Is it a case that Joy News had men across the constituency?
Yes, my lord.
Will it also be the case that Joy News had men stationed at every constituency?
At every polling station?
Every polling station I meant.
No, my lord.
Can you give the Commission a general overview as to how your men covered the election?
So on the day, before the elections, we had planned, and on the day we deployed a total of 3 reporters to cover the by-election. And they were asked to go around the polling stations. I mean, there were more than 100 polling stations. It's impossible to have a man in each polling station. So in essence, they move around from polling station to polling station, and also had built contacts. If something was happening somewhere, you get a call and then you rush there so that you can get the live, up-to-date coverage for our listeners. In essence, that's what election coverage comes down to.
Now, there's been reports of certain incidents during the election. Did your men cover any of the incidents?
Yes, my lord. The incident that we are aware of is, which has become very topical because my domain is the media, is the lab violation incident. And that incident, yes, we had a man on the ground who covered it for us. Yes, my lord.
Did your man file any report with regards to the incident?
Yes, my lord. My man on the ground filed detailed reports. John uses both radio and TV. We are also online. With my, subsequently goes on to my John online. So yes, our reports on the ground did file reports from the lab violation incident.
Do you have copies of that report available?
Yes, my lord. This part of the documentations that we have compiled is video and pictorial evidence of what we covered, which we've put together on a pen drive. One of it came before the commission yesterday. In fact, we submitted it yesterday, but we've brought an additional pen drive. It has more videos of our coverage on it. And as my counsel has indicated, we are willing to bring the rest if we get leave to do so after today.
So then, if I heard you right, you have already submitted a report, you have another one here, and with leave, you will submit another one later.
Yes, my lord.
When did you submit this report?
The first one on a pen drive came yesterday because we're asked to do so by 4 p.m. yesterday. And so we have submitted one yesterday.
And for the record, to whom did you submit?
I would not know that readily, but I know my HR brought a copy.
Very well. Now, the one in court, before the commission, do you have it readily available here?
Yes, we do. We do have an additional pen drive with additional details on it.
And you don't mind handing over a copy to the commission?
Not at all, my lord.
Can we keep the pen drive?
Yes, my lord, you can.
Most grateful. Now, did your reporters report on any other incident apart from Labawaleshi?
So apart from the Labawaleshi one, which took a lot of the coverage, and as we all know, it dominated the coverage of the by-elections, although it was in one place in Bawaleshi. We also generally covered voter turnout, the conduct of the polls generally. We spoke to the election officers who were manning the various polling stations. We spoke to the police. We spoke to voters who had turned out to vote. We also spoke to political actors, as in those who were monitoring the polls. We also spoke to the leadership of the various political parties on the day. And so there's a wide range of things that we did apart from the Bawaleshi, but admittedly, and the way news works, the Bawaleshi incident dominated the coverage largely. And once it happened, it just took over and became the most dominant and talked about incident during the by-election. Yes, my lord. Yes, my lord.
Now, all these other incidents covered, are they covered by a report?
If you may explain briefly what you mean by report, my lord.
Did you put that into any sort of publication?
So, my lord, we have various specific programs that, in essence, carry these reports. So, for radio, we have the 6 a.m. bulletin. I'm talking about these main bulletins. The 6 a.m. bulletin, We have the midday bulletin. We have top story, which is in the evening, 5:30 to 6. And we have Newsnight, which is 6 to 7. And then on TV, we have similar programming. And so we have right from the morning, we have the AM show. Well, on radio, we also have the morning show, which also does quite extensive work. It's quite extensive work on the by-election. On radio, we have similar. We have the equivalent of the morning show on Joy News. We have news programs that come right after that throughout the day. So these various programs carry the reports. And so you would notice that midday news will have reports of the incidents coming from the by-election, and that will filter into the evening news programs. So we'll replicate it on TV as well. So these reports that I talk of were reports that were carried in these specific programs, as we have it both on television and on radio.
Now, for the purposes of these programs you've just mentioned, did your men on the ground carry out investigations? No, let me rephrase. Did they carry out interviews?
Yes, my lord.
Are all those materials included in what you have given the commission?
Specifically, my lord, the interviews form part of the body of work that my counsel had requested leave to provide. So we'll provide that subsequently if the commission grants us the leave, my lord.
How soon can that be done?
I would have to consult with because it's a technical work. I would have to get a technical team to locate and pull it on a file. We'll probably have to, because it's huge, television and radio stuff is going to take quite a bit of time. But we can give you specific time once we consult with the technical team that will be doing the search and the uploading onto a pen drive for us to submit.
Close of day tomorrow, is it possible?
I think close of day, Friday, most likely.
Very well. So, Mr. Mensah, the commission will expect the information by close of day Friday.
Thank you, my lord.
Very well. Mr. Mensah, since you are an experienced broadcast journalist, is it right to assume that you've covered extensive electoral processes in this country?
Yes, my lord. Not only in this country, but abroad as well. I was very integral in the coverage of the U.S. elections that brought in Donald Trump. And so, yes, I have extensive experience in that area.
Very well. Can the commission tap into your knowledge?
So far as I can help, yes. Why not, my lord?
Let's talk about electoral violence. Electoral violence. You agree with me that for some time now, our by-elections in particular are characterized by violence. Do you?
Yes, my lord, a few of them. Talensi, we have Tripoli, we have Atiwa, we've had Ayawaso West Wagon. All of them had varying degrees of violence. Yes, my lord.
Mr. Mensah, from your experience, what do you think are some of the causes of this violence?
Well, just basically from a journalistic point of view and talking to people, the sense you get talking to people is, see, what we now know has been tagged as political vigilantism and the deep-seated mistrust that political actors have for state institutions, particularly the police. So parties normally find themselves in a position, tend to mistrust the police. And the police, as we've become to know, and what my coverage of the elections has taught us, has jurisdiction in terms of providing security for elections. However, we have a situation that, based on the coverage over the years, you've seen mainly parties in the opposition not trusting the police, and so you get to a point where the parties themselves then begin to provide their own form of security, which obviously then conflicts with state security and has led to that sort of intense rivalry that in some cases has degenerated into outright violence. People were either maimed, in some cases killed. Fundamentally, that mistrust for state institutions such as the police is what tends to have created this scenario where by-elections have become particularly full of incidents of the violent nature.
But you agree with me that the situation is not the same with general elections?
Not quite. General elections have also recorded its own measure of violence in varying degrees, depending on the nature of a flashpoint. So time was when institutions like the West African Network for Peace Building, going into an election, will release a list of flashpoints and put institutions on notice about these flashpoints and their potential to degenerate into violence. In fact, the Electoral Commission also has a system where they also identify their flashpoints, and sometimes in talking to the police, they share with the police what the flashpoints are. As journalists, we also are interested in the flashpoints because in deploying reporters, we also, sorry, I need to slow down again. Forgive me. In deploying reporters, we also look at these flashpoints and use that as a basis for our own deployment, because we also want to be in the thick of the action. So we send people to these places so that if indeed the flashpoint means it has a potential for violence, if indeed that happens, then you can report. You can bring our listeners up to speed on what happens. So in national elections, also there has been violence also in national elections, as we've seen.
Mr. Mensah, going forward, what do you suggest will be some of the solutions to this issue of electoral violence and vigilantism?
It's an interesting question. I'm not an expert, my lord, but I would, just based on talking to the political actors, talking to civil society, talking to ordinary voters, and referencing what ordinary, everyday Ghanaians have told us through our everyday work, because that's what we do. We give the microphones to the ordinary people, the everyday Ghanaian who normally want to have a voice to speak. And they've had a lot to say about vigilantism, party political violence. Just this past week, we did a show like that where we had a citizens conversation about this. And part of the question was asked ordinary people, businessmen, communications people, generally about what they think the state can do to fix a problem. What I'm going to say fundamentally are thoughts from that constituency of people. So everyday Ghanaians speaking generally about what they feel about the vigilantism and political violence. One of the key things these audience of ours have suggested is to depoliticize our security agencies, starting with the police. A key recommendation that I've heard from our audience to us is to give the IGP security of tenure. That's one. Even take away the power of appointment from the executive and put it in a sort of a commission of other security or people qualified, neutral people, people other than political class. To make that appointment. I have also heard from our audience a recommendation that even the post of an IGP, just like we have in the lower ranks of the police where promotions are based on exam and assessment, should be one that people so qualified should apply for, and a competitive process used to select the very best. That is one. For the group of audience who recognize that we're almost at the point where it appears the horse is already bolted from the stable, which is that the vigilante groups are already with us. They suggest, one, the political parties must be made, and there's a lot of talk about this, and you get a sense from our audience that they're fed up with the mere talk and no action. The political parties must be made, compelled either by law, to immediately disband these groups. Not only disband the groups, disarm the groups. Because I've heard members of the audience who listen to Joy FM or the Joy News on television say to us that if you only disband, we know that some of these individuals are armed. What do they do with the arms they have if you only disband? There must be a deliberate process to disarm them, either through an amnesty system, which we've tried in the North before, where guns were washed in the North. We provided an amnesty. People can bring their guns, either for a reward. The state is buying back the guns. That's one suggestion I've heard from some of my audience, as in how that can happen. And there's another layer of suggestion I've heard, which is how do you deal with the fundamental mistrust that mainly parties in opposition have for the state institutions? Because they feel the institution is politicized. There must be, another suggestion I've heard is to deliberately come up with a strategy that builds bridges between the police and the political parties on a regular basis. You can have a regular forum where they interact. They have direct access to the system, the police system, just as the incumbent party would. And if it's agreed that the man at the top is not appointed by the political class, but by a neutral system of peers or another body not political, that then could be a confidence-boosting measure. That's another suggestion I have heard from some of our listeners who have participated in some of the shows that we've done on this subject and will continue to do. My Lord.
Now, for the purposes of the record, will you please state the name of the man you had stationed at La Bawaleshi?
The man stationed at La Bawaleshi was my colleague, Roland Walker.
Mr. Mensah, the program you last described is very insightful.
My Lord, please repeat that.
The program you did, are you
on the evils of political vigilantism. Because really that's what the media is supposed to do. Is to be the eyes, the ears of the population. And to continue to create platforms such as I had just recounted for citizens. Because what I have come to learn in my job, that the number one thing a politician fears the most is a thumb, right? When you, as media, give platform for ordinary voices to consistently talk about how this affects your lives, express their outrage about such things that politicians do, you send a signal to the politician that we no longer tolerate it. And we might punish you come the election. However, we have to be consistent. Because if you talk about it one day, you abandon it, then the politician get a breathing space, and we return to life as usual. So for me, I think that is one of the primary ways we can contribute to this. Provide a platform for everyday citizens, the electorate most affected by this, to take on the political class. And hopefully through that process, the politician will come to realize that you will not be rewarded when it comes to elections because you put out vigilante groups. Because the citizens keep on speaking that they don't, in essence, endorse that. I think for me, that is one of the ways that we can help, but also shine a light on, and we try to do that in my work as journalist at Joy FM. If politicians are in public saying they are committed to disbanding vigilantism, but in private recruiting political party tags for their purposes, it is our duty, and the Constitution so enjoins us to expose that hypocrisy, so that the electorate will see through and hopefully make a decision come election time, because that's what the politician is most afraid of. And punish, I guess, the group of political class who seem to be speaking one thing in public, meanwhile doing the very opposite in private. Our job is to expose that, shine a light on it, and be consistent in creating platforms where these issues are discussed dispassionately, apolitically, but also in a manner designed to offer solutions, translate into votes come election day. My Lord.
Mr. Mensah. Enough.
There are no consequences. And so you commit a crime, and then you put on a political robe, and then you get away with it. So yes, I've heard that view. And that view has been expressed by our listeners. What they wish to see is that regardless of a person's political affiliation, the law indeed should be blind and punish regardless. But they also acknowledge, and this is again going back to the various shows I've hosted on this topic, that you can suggest that and be an ostrich, because the people who are supposed to enforce that law, fundamentally the police, seem to have been politicized. So they are taking instructions from a politician who is a minister, who the IGP has to answer to. The IGP is a political figure. He belongs to a political party. If a member of his group is the one accused of such a crime, there will be hesitation. And so they acknowledge that that is a problem that needs to be fixed first before you can expect the police to be fearless, firm, and fair in dealing with these criminals. My Lord.
We had one Mr. Mutala Mohammed before the commission yesterday. His opinion is that to say we should ban political parties, vigilante groups, is to say we should ban MPP and NDC. You agree with him?
No, my Lord, I do not.
Is there anything else you want to add to your testimony so far?
No, my Lord.
Very well. Mr. Chairman, your witness.
Mr. Mensah, thank you very much for your testimony. And also thank you for the views which you have collated, both from the programs you have organized and interviews that you have had with members of the public and civil society organizations, etc. Do you think that there is the political will on the part of the two dominant political parties to make the changes which you are suggesting? I'm thinking in particular about the appointment process of the IGP, and also with that you suggested advertising the position of the IGP. Do you think that there is a political will on the part of the political parties, especially the two dominant political parties?
My Lord, of our elections and political history for so long, I said I've done this for 15 years, and in all the 15 years I've seen this, and it almost appears to be getting worse. So clearly for me, from where I sit and from all the work we've done, there doesn't seem to be the political will. However, to the second question, how do you then deal with it if there's no political will? I would say that the power of the state really resides with the people, fundamentally. That, in real sense, will manifest itself through civil society work. That in itself will manifest through work of everyday citizens. And my answer will be posing a question, which is, how committed are we ourselves as citizens and civil society to push the political class? One, to develop the political will, and to make the changes we require. I dare say that from that point of view, we haven't pushed enough. Citizens generally and civil society as well. I mean, there are many tools at our disposal as citizens and civil society that we can deploy, and he's shown to work in the past. The Right Information Bill is a classical example. It's been there for 10 years plus. But in recent reports on Parliament, it's been 10 years, but progress has been made. The last report, they've changes, they're committed to passing it this year, they put in a clause, pardon me, to delay implementation for a year once it's passed. But we are getting there. Because there's been relentless civil society and public push for this. It's been on the news every time. For me, I look at that, and that, for me, is a strategy that we can take as well. Take that issue of vigilantism, civil society, ordinary citizens, and make it a daily campaign subject. Unity among civil society, unity among citizens through various actions, forums, peaceful marches, petitions, demanding to meet the political class, drawing the attention to the consequences of the polls, drawing international attention to it, and be consistent at it, no matter how long it takes. We've seen that that works. It will take time, but if it is consistent, I believe from what we've seen in many other things that we've eventually come to either repeal criminal libel law. I mentioned the Freedom of Information Act, which is back in Parliament now because there's pressure. We can do something. If the citizens, civil society, get angry enough about the subject, media, collectively, I believe we can force the political class to make changes.
That imposes a great responsibility on the media to empower the citizenry, to hold accountable those in public office, and to get them to make changes in the way we do our politics. I'm sure you would agree that the ordinary citizens have not been empowered enough to be able to appreciate the importance of the role that they can play in getting the politicians to behave in a manner that would ensure the peace and stability of the nation. And that you therefore have a huge responsibility to arouse the anger and indignation of the citizens. Because at the end of the day, as you say, the politicians fear the power of the thumb. If the politicians know that when elections are held, the masses will vote in a particular way because of how they have been empowered, then they would act in the appropriate manner.
My Lord, I agree with you entirely. And that's why we commit, multimedia is a very powerful institution, to have these engagements on a regular basis, to draw attention to that. And hopefully with the cooperation of civil society, we can get somewhere. And that's a commitment that we definitely have as an institution, my Lord.
Okay. Now, the recommendation about the appointment of the IGP is something that strikes at the root of the Constitution. There have been other recommendations, for example, about not allowing MPs to be ministers. I think someone who came before the commission has already recommended that is something that also needs to change so that Parliament has proper oversight of the executive. We know that we're going to have elections of DCs, and that would help to redress the imbalance in political control of the various institutions of state. Are there any other recommendations which strike at the root of the Constitution which you think would help to deal with the problem we are facing? I'm sure you are aware that some time ago the IEA did public consultations on the winner-takes-all system. And I'm sure you have studied the winner-takes-all system, the control which the executive has over not only powers of appointment, but the ability to award contracts and absolute state capture. What have you done to encourage the present administration to resuscitate the constitutional review process? That was suspended after the elections in 2016.
My Lord, thank you for the question. The constitutional review process, I must admit, is a subject that we haven't touched. But now that you've brought it up, it's clear that it's something that we should pay attention to as media and as myself and my colleagues, because therein lies a lot of the recommendations that would, if not all, part of the problem we've talked about, but hasn't been discussed or explored, revisited. And we have a responsibility as media, as I said earlier, to shine a light and ask questions why it hasn't been worked on, since we spent all the monies on going around the country and speaking to ordinary people, collating the views and making a document and having a white paper, and yet hasn't moved forward from there. It's a responsibility that we take, and we take seriously. I haven't heard your suggestion, my Lord.
Based on your interaction with the public and also all the discussions that you have organized, what have you discovered is the main motivation for the political parties to have vigilante groups? Is it their personal security, or is it protection of the public, of the ballot box, or is there any other reason or motivation that the political parties have advanced, or you have heard that they have, for keeping these militia groups? In fact, I don't like to call them vigilantes, because we have citizen vigilante in the person of Mr. Amide, which is not a negative connotation. You have community vigilante groups which seek to protect, their communities without, of course, flouting the law. So really, these groups appear to be militia groups. Okay, now, based on your discussions with the citizenry and also probably with politicians, what have you discovered to be the main motivation for them having these vigilante groups, if I may use that terminology again?
I'll divide my answer into two. There's what the politicians themselves have told us is the reason, and what citizens have said. Sometimes you find there's a dichotomy there. The politicians have said, mainly, that the reason why they have the political vigilantes is to provide party security for internal elections, but most importantly for national elections. They have it when they are in opposition, but they maintain them when they're in power. I've also heard another reason for having the political vigilante groups for the parties, which is that it's really become a means of keeping these party foot soldiers active. So what tends to happen is when you're in government, you have them. You slip them into the security services, or you then put them on a payroll. When you're out of government, it becomes much more difficult to do that. So what do you do with them? I've heard some of our people have interacted with civil society groups, but also the politicians themselves, is the truth is they'll come to you and still demand money, but you have to pull them to work. So they simply find work for them, and they believe they can become security people. And so they keep them on, in essence, to keep them occupied, hoping that one day if they win power, then the cycle continues. And so for these other people who benefit from that process, it's become lucrative. And so you find that there are rival groups in the political parties themselves, rival vigilante groups in the political parties themselves, competing for the attention of their leaders. So there are camps. So there's Camp A, who belongs to ex-politician in the same party. There's a Camp B. And it becomes a contest. Sometimes internally they fight. We've had reports yesterday about an alleged similar incident in Kumasi, which has been investigated by the police, by the way. So that is the second, I guess, critical reason why they are there. But I have also heard, and this is a particular case I want to cite because we did it publicly, it's part of the news cycle. A couple of weeks back, I was asking well-qualified people, suitably qualified people that will then be trained under the umbrella of the Regional Coordinating Council as election security team for the elections. For the three, they'll be providing service on 3 levels. So from the registration through to voting, election day, and post-voting throughout the process. We got the letter and we thought we could get more understanding of really what these people will be doing. So we posed as one of the chairmen and called the security liaison officer and asked him that question. And he said, one of the things we'll be doing is protecting the ballot box. In fact, what he said was, so that if they are there and somebody is taking the ballot box away and the police are not acting, we'll train them what to do. And we are happy to provide that as part of the documents that we said we'll provide by close of day on Friday. So, and he said the kind of people they wanted are courageous people. Not people, and these are his own words, not people who, when you shout at them, they'll run away. So that's a category of people they wanted. So in there lies one of the other reasons why they keep them. Protecting the ballot box, which is a primary responsibility for the police. He himself acknowledges it. But says if the ballot box is being taken away, we will train our people how to react to it. So fundamentally, the elections seem to be the #1 primary reason why they keep them. To protect the polls, to protect their interests at the polls, in spite of having legally mandated, so licensed polling station agents. they believe you still have to have this extra layer of well-built, sometimes armed individuals who are courageous, who will not run when you shout, who can give you security and protect your interests at the polls. In essence, my lord, these are the reasons I have come to know based on my work I've done in the last 15 years.
We have also heard testimony, I think from the Minister for National Security, that the CDD has done a study and they arrived at the conclusion that these militia groups are owned and funded by individuals in the parties, not necessarily owned and funded by the political parties themselves. What do you say to this this finding or report made by the CDD? Based on your interaction with people, what credence can you give to this? Have you been able to read that the CDD report?
No, I have not read the report.
Okay.
However, I have heard citizens, politicians themselves talk about the ownership of these vigilante groups. And both views are captured in what you just said, the CDD report captures, which is one, funding is done by individuals. But in cases, once the individuals fund them, they act in the interests of the political party. So, and the political party will not disown them. So we've had incidents last couple of years, last year and the year before, where some vigilante groups of a political party alleged to have done something. You speak to the party leadership and they tell you on radio that these are men. However, if they commit crime, the law should deal with them. But they argue that it's an association. And so it's not a crime to have people associate. But then they create a distinction of they can associate, but when they start to commit crime, then the state must deal with you. So that is the party itself owning the existence. But when it comes to the funding, we've heard elements in the various political parties assert that they fund some of these groups. So that's what I've come to understand, speaking from the politicians themselves and sometimes even the vigilante group members themselves.
Okay, you've also spoken about mistrust by the opposition parties, be they NDC or NPP, whoever is in power, of the police. They trust the police when they're in power, but when they're in opposition, they don't trust the police. Did I hear you?
Yes, my lord, I said that.
All right. Do you think there is a similar mistrust of the military? Or that mistrust doesn't apply to the military? I ask that for a reason, which I would move on to after you answer my question.
My lord, my line of work, I haven't done too much work on the military, so I'm restricted in that answer. So I'm not in a position to offer an opinion on the military specifically, my lord.
Thank you. I saw counsel giving some legal advice on that. The reason I asked you that question is, until we can deal with the mistrust that people and the opposition parties have of the police, I was wondering whether you think it would be feasible to entrust security of the elections to the military.
Well, that's a very interesting suggestion, except to say that I have seen in elections, again, this is something that is observable. that in elections sometimes the military work with the police, because I've seen them patrol prior to election, during election day, the military working together with the police, sometimes to police an election. And so if that relationship already exists, I believe based on the right conversations, that can happen. But I'm just doubting the legality of it, because the military has its own role to play in terms of not acting domestically. If they have to come under the direction and command of the police. And so I'm sure there'll be legal hurdles there, and I'm pretty sure, having done this work for 15 years, I've seen civil society groups take the military to court when they've acted the domestic scene. And so that definitely might be a challenge. But we've seen them, just by observing elections, act together with the police. So it's a possibility that can be explored, my lord.
Now, what about the possibility of demobilizing these groups and integrating them into either the police force or the military force, or finding some avenue to contain them, so that, because one of the reasons that has been given is the unemployment. Most of them don't have employment, and this is an avenue for a lot of them.
Yeah, my lord.
So if the vigilante groups can be demobilized and integrated in some way to some institution or the other, will that be a possible solution to this problem?
No, my lord. The reason why I say that is I've heard politicians say in the last few weeks about what happened at Ayawaso, that the people that they saw, that we've now come to know from state actors, are members of the national security team. I've heard political actors on the other side say that they identify some of them as party activists who have been integrated. And that feeds the mistrust. And so I dare suggest that that is already happening. The integration is already happening. And that once the party comes to power, then he integrates their people into the service, allegedly. And then the other side, knowing that that happens because they've been in power before, then don't trust the system anymore, because they now have lost the ability to now put their own people. But they know, because we did it, they've done it. And so they have their people there, and so they don't trust the system. So that could, I believe, possibly worsen it if we agree to integrate these elements into the security services. But then again, I believe the fundamental question is, what do you do with them if you demobilize? I guess it's a question that together as civil society, this commission and elsewhere, we could explore. But I believe, because of what I've heard politicians say, is a reason why they arm themselves. They cite the integration into the system by the incumbent party of their private security group they had in opposition as a reason why they don't trust the system. And so if we make that then an official way of doing things, that could then open a whole Pandora's box. That's what I'll say, my lord.
Right, just one or two more questions, and then I would get other members of the commission to ask you questions. Based on your conversation and the consultations you have done with civil society groups and the public, what would you suggest, or are you aware of how the national security apparatus functions? First of all, are you, as a journalist of over 15 years, are you aware of the operations of the national security?
No, my lord.
You're not.
No, my lord.
To undertake at this.
I listened.
Of war, internal conflict, civil conflict, where it is improving that both sides have been integrated quite successfully. And I'll answer it just based on that experience and say, from what you suggest, yes, if we do it across the political divide and follow the example of other countries who've successfully done it, and there isn't favoritism, but it's fair, where amnesty is granted, first of all. In other countries that I've observed, that's what the first thing they did is to say amnesty. You can bring your weapons and nothing will happen to you. And people know that they are comfortable, and it's applied to every political party. That, I believe, could be something that could work. Yes, my lord.
Thank you very much. I've had thoughts on those after listening to all the discussions. That it won't be enough to tell people to go home. And that's why I was running it past the last witness, that when the British demobilized the West Africa Frontier Force, they took them into the services, police, prisons, I believe even the army. They were largely illiterate, but they had been to war and they knew how to fire guns and stuff like that. They created the escort class within their forces, and everybody knew that these people were not going to rise to be IGP, because the qualifications that the police require can't be met by these people who enjoy stature and power when their parties are in power. And so I was thinking, as part of the public consultation and sensitization that your work enables you to do, perhaps you might want to take up the angle of real integration and rehabilitation, so that when you criminalize the formation of such groups, you wouldn't have criminalized a means of income for people who otherwise have no other means.
Yes, my lord, we commit to do that.
Thank you very much. And while shining your light, could you shine it from the angle of the people who derive stature from these positions? Because whatever you do, if they are able to wear something called a uniform and can boast of being even on duty, you would be surprised the things that people take pride in. We might want to investigate from their angle so that we can have a national conversation on what to do with them to take them off. But as for being malicious, they are. And we shouldn't use nice euphemisms like political vigilantism. They are private militias. And the danger is that, as you pointed out, these rival groups are beginning to fight within the parties, which means that they answer to particular leaders. That makes the leaders warlords. And this is warlordism that, if not checked, can degenerate. So let's have a holistic conversation, helped along by your resources, so that we can all live in peace in a country that respects democracy. When we democratized, we were looking at state institutions and so on. We didn't look at the ordinary person who has been through colonialism, authoritarianism, military governmentism, semi-military governmentism, and have become used to being ordered about, used to being beaten on the head by anybody who wears anything that looks like a uniform. Can we begin to de-traumatize the Ghanaian and let Ghanaians insist on their rights? Once upon a time in the United States, I was on a train, and a military guy, obviously going home on leave, joined the train. I was the only one nervous. I kept looking over my shoulder at this soldier because he was dressed in uniform. Everybody else ignored him. It took a while before I realized I was nervous because I was a Ghanaian. And in Ghana, when you see a soldier, you react. Everybody else ignored him. So perhaps we need to work on the national psyche, that those days are behind us. And so we should not just accept anything. Then people putting hapless, unemployed, unemployable young men into uniform to cause commotion might think twice. So I believe you can help a lot in the detoxifying the Ghanaian mind. And I encourage you to do it. And thank you for all the educative programs you mount.
Thank you very much, my lord.
My brother Evans.
Yes, my lord.
Unlike Madam, I've not been listening to you and to all the mainstream media a lot in the last 6 months, not because I don't want to, but because contrary to what we think here in Accra, there is so much propaganda that we are reaching these stations there, and when you get out of Accra, you're a villager. The reception is so poor, and I don't know what we can all do about it. And about 4 months ago, I was in Ho, and in Ho, there's only one of the mainstream FM stations that was, I won't mention the name, but it belongs to your group. But I've been in the north for the past month, and I've come back completely a villager. Even my favorite sports programs, you just can't get them. And when you get them, there's so much distortion. And then I think we do our programs here in Accra. We expect some stations to take them over. It has no relevance to their way of life. When they go to work, when they come back, and we are always referring to people in Accra. When we are even mentioning names of people that should go on committees and things, we are always mentioning people in Accra. So it becomes relevant. So I've become a complete villager in the last 3-4 months. I don't know what all of us as a society can do to help the few organizations that are trying to. And there's a lot of so much good public education from the media. But what can we do to help the media to grow, to become relevant to those outside of Accra?
My lord, just on a lighter note, I would recommend that we'll get you a digibox, because wherever you are in Ghana, you just need to install it and you can listen to all the radio networks and watch TV in crystal clear picture and language. And so I'll do well to speak to my team and deliver one to you. No matter in your village, you can get it. That's on a lighter note.
Before you continue, on a lighter note, you know the stations that are so easy to get in those areas. I stayed in 5 different hotels in Tamale. And I don't know which your technical word for a group of channels that you can get from one source. What's the technical word for it?
I'll struggle to mention the technical word for it, but I understand what you're saying.
There
my
are
lord.
about 30 religious programs. And from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. Excuse me to say, the amount of religious trash and misinformation and lies that they spew out to our people. And there were 2 hotels, that's the only thing you get. So if you're not asleep, you have to watch them. And the names are so glorious. I can't mention names here. They are so glorious. And I said, this business of, what the religious groups dish out to us, again, is there not anything that as a nation we can do something about?
As a media, there's a lot we can do. I can speak for myself and my group. And if you go onto our platform, we have, of course, a few religious channels there, but mainly the focus is on content that educate, informs, but also entertain. So Joy News does a lot of documentaries in villages, very remote areas. They are not reached, but most of the people who watch us are in the villages. So we go there to tell their stories, stories that affect their lives mostly, on almost all our platforms. Joy FM does it as well. We have a regular documentary program that only dedicated to doing that. But generally, you've raised a question that we've been battling with ourselves in the media for a long time. The media is very under-resourced in Ghana. And there's a conversation that we've kept on having about how do we get to a point where we can be resourced enough so we can provide the sort of service that obviously will deal with the challenges that you've identified. And it's still a conversation that is ongoing. I've heard this government suggest creating a fund to boost capacity, for example. That is one way. UNESCO itself is exploring ways of helping media generally grow. So I will suggest that it's a conversation that is ongoing, and we will take some of the suggestions that has come up in the past and see if, together with other stakeholders, this is something that we could push even further than it's been so far.
Okay, brother. I'm asking only 4 questions. No, 4 contributions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people always talk about the police, and they end up with appointment of IGPs. I don't know whether you discussed it in the past, but we should also discuss the laws and regulations governing the police, because that's where the problem is. Laws from the Constitution, the laws from the police instrument itself, the service instructions which are made under the Act, the manuals, so that we think of ways to depoliticize and dehumanize those laws. You'll be surprised at the amount of human rights injustice that we can visit on ourselves as a police service. And right from the way we train our police to the way the procedures are, there's very little room to be independent-minded or to have pity for the ordinary citizen, because what they visit on you in your training grounds and in your barracks, it becomes part of you. So you think that that's what Kenyans deserve. So please, let them discuss these manuals. The second one is, when you are thinking of reforming the police, it should be done with thinking of reforming the law enforcement community as a group. There's no point if you give, I always say that, give this example, if you give the police vehicles, if you create more courts, you have better lawyers as judges. Then between them, you are not doing anything for the prisons. So you go to court as a lawyer, as Samson knows, and your suspect has not been brought from the prisons because you have not reformed the prisons. Any time you see or hear about vehicles being given to the police by successive governments, do you ever remember the last time you saw vehicles being given to the prisons?
No, my lord.
Especially, I think in Africa, we are about still the only continent where it is the police that carry prisoners to the courts, and what they used to call go ahead. And there's only one. And so suspects are late and witnesses are late, and the whole criminal justice system. So, and the criminal justice system has been interpreted widely. Police, the courts, the prisons, even these days, immigration, customs in our country, maybe even NADMO, it has become part of the system. So we need to look at reviews and reforms of those other institutions in relation to the police.